Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. A devotee commented, "You are the great master shedding joy and bliss on the world. Your love is indeed unlimited, that you choose to abide in the world in human shape. But I wish to know if one should necessarily realize oneself before being of help to the country and the leader of people." The Maharshi replied, "Realize the self first, and the rest will follow." The devotee said, "America is now the foremost country in industrial matters, mechanical engineering, scientific advance, and other worldly affairs. Will she come up to the same level in spiritual life also?" Maharshi replied, "Certainly." The devotee said, "Thank God that it will be so. I am a partner in an engineering firm, but it is not a vital concern to me. I try to bring spiritual ideals into the workaday life of the firm." Maharshi said, "That is good. If you surrender yourself to the higher power, all is well. That power sees your affairs through. Only so long as you think that you are the worker, you are obliged to reap the fruits of your actions. If, on the other hand, you surrender yourself and recognize your individual self is only a tool of the higher power, that power will take over your affairs along with the fruits of the actions. You are no longer affected by them, and the work goes on unhampered. Whether you recognize the power or not, the scheme of things does not alter. Only there is a change of outlook. Why should you bear your load on your head when you are traveling on a train? It carries you and your load, whether the load is on your head or on the floor of the train. You are not lessening the burden of the train by keeping it on your head, but only straining yourself unnecessarily. Similar is the sense of doership in the world. The only permanent thing is reality, and that is the self. You say, I am going, I am speaking, I am working, etc. Hyphenate I am in all of them. Thus, I am. That is the abiding and fundamental reality. This truth was taught by God to Moses. I am that I am. Be still and know that I am God. So I am is God. You know that you are. You cannot deny your existence at any moment of time. For you must be there in order to deny it. This pure existence is understood by stilling your mind. The mind is the outgoing faculty of the individual. If that is turned within, it becomes still over time, and that I am alone prevails. I am is the whole truth. The devotee commented, I appreciate the whole answer. The Maharshi said, who is there to appreciate what? Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So today, for a few minutes, I'd like to talk about what I'm calling radical trust. The Maharshi, in this reading, in a very simple and direct way, gives an example of not carrying your baggage on your head when you're sitting on the train and putting the baggage on the floor and letting the train do the work. And this also is what I'm referring to when I talk about radical trust. Every single day, all of us trust, even though some of us may think that we don't really trust very much. But we trust the bank with our money, if we use a bank. We trust when we get in an automobile and drive that the other drivers are trustworthy. We trust the people who prepare our food. We trust our housemates, our partners. So we all possess a sort of ordinary trust, to some degree or another. If nothing else, we trust when we go to sleep at night that we will awaken the next morning. So in a way, we can say that we live our lives on a foundation of trust. But once we've had a glimpse of reality, of the truth, even if it's just a momentary glimpse, just for a moment we know I am, or I am here, or I know that I'm aware, even if it's only a momentary glimpse, or even if we have to be reminded continuously. Whether we've had a momentary glimpse or a more lasting or abiding foundation in reality, the ordinary trust that we carry with us each day, moment by moment, which makes it possible for us to be in the world and to act as we do, has to be upgraded just a little bit. We have to go to a 2.0. When we do this, what happens is we begin to cultivate, or we begin to experience directly, a trust that comes from trusting the teachings, trusting the Master. Siddhartha, some of you know I've used this example before, was asked one day, what was it that enabled him to awaken? And he said, my Master said, you are that. And I believed him. So this is this next level of trust. The trust of being a sadhak, which is what is the Sanskrit or Indian word for what all of you are, which are those people who've had some sort of a glimpse of reality, and now you're making some effort to remain as awareness itself. Throughout your daily life, you're coming to satsang. You're reminding yourself from time to time that you are only awareness and that everything else is passing. So you've already established this next layer or level, if you will, of trust, which is beyond ordinary trust. and is the trust of a spiritual seeker, the trust of someone who's had a glimpse of the truth in their own life and in their own being, and now seeks to become established in that truth, seeks to become abiding in that truth all of the time. But what I'm pointing to here, I'm calling radical trust because it is the next level of trust. It's the kind of trust that says, I am that which is aware only. And then which seeks to understand that everything around oneself, even though there still is a residual sense of individuality or personality or I-ness, looks around oneself and trusts very deeply, very deliberately, that everything that is the self. Even when the mind is screaming, no, this can't be true. Or no, I don't understand this. Or no, I don't get it. One keeps looking around oneself and saying, everything is the self, and I am that. In this radical form of trust, and the reason I call it radical is because everything that is here, now, in this moment, is accepted as the divine, as the truth. And the reason it's accepted is because there's a deep understanding that if it's here, it's the divine. If I'm having this experience, this is the supreme in my life. Now this is easy to do if you're feeling happy, blissful, and your life seems to be going well. Except remember, I'm calling this radical trust. And the trust is that all of this is the divine. And even in wonderful things happening, even in blissful moments, you may have noticed there's this tendency for the mind to say, oh, I am great. I must be doing well. Everything is going fine. I must be the blessed one in this moment. And the mind instantly co-opts the natural joy and happiness, which is part of life itself and has its origin in life itself, not in me. That this joy that I experience, or this bliss I experience, doesn't have its foundation in circumstances. It has its foundation in the Supreme, in the Self, and in self-knowledge, self-knowing. And how much more difficult it is for most of us to accept very difficult circumstances as also being that which is the presentation or the representation of the divine. By difficult circumstances, I include things like loss of a loved one, loss of one's health, loss of one's fortune, loss of a family member. All of these things come to us, don't they, in course of a natural and normal life. We have a really difficult time understanding through what I'm calling radical truth or radical trust that this also is the will of the divine. How do I know that? It is here, now, in consciousness, as awareness. Our tendency, and the thing that makes it so difficult to live in this radical trust, is the fact that as soon as something becomes very difficult, we immediately begin to identify with it. We begin to doubt ourselves, to judge ourselves. And this judging and this doubting becomes proof that I cannot be awake. Because I'm thinking this, I'm feeling this, I'm having this experience. This is the proof that I'm just an ego trapped in myself. Rather than cultivating the kind of radical trust, radical faith, if you will, that because this is here, this is the will of the Supreme. My task is to remain aware, to remember, yes, this is going on, this is difficult. I can feel the pain of this. But the opportunity, the blessing of this, is that I am very clear that I am. And sometimes this is more easily felt in what we perceive to be pain, suffering, and difficulty than it is in joy and bliss. This recognition that I cannot escape this deep knowing that I am here through this difficulty, and that I'm required by this difficulty to stand firm in this life as it is, and to accept it, and thereby know the inner strength that I have. So again, turning from the outer object back in to the I am presence, and thereby knowing everything is a gift of the Supreme. It is the opportunity to know that I am here in this moment. And so while we don't say, in order to awaken, I have to suffer and go seeking it, not any more than we would intentionally go over and stub our toe on the door jamb, just to know that I'm here. We are willing, when difficult moments arise, difficult circumstances, difficult people arise in our lives, we are willing to stand in it as awareness itself. This is radical trust, putting all of our faith in the fact that whatever is here is coming so that consciousness, as I am, can illumine and awaken itself. And that this body-mind is the vehicle for that. And these difficult experiences are an opportunity to return to I am, to remain or return to being, consciousness, and bliss. Even though we may not completely and totally feel that we are being, consciousness, and bliss at this moment. It is the understanding and the returning to the recognition I am, being, consciousness, bliss, that gives us an anchor point for when our habitual tendency is to identify with what's going on rather than who I am. To habitually identify with circumstances of body, mind, and world, rather than remaining as I am. So this is radical trust. This is what's necessary to go from an ordinary understanding, which enables us to stay in the teaching or to stay in the practice, to come to this place where we don't need the teaching or the practice anymore. And the reason is, what I'm calling radical trust has a real penetrative quality. It penetrates through the belief in either side of duality, straight to the heart of I am. And so we have to continually recognize that by recalling, remembering, reminding ourselves that in all circumstances we have to trust in a radical way, not in an ordinary way. It's by doing this that we're able to penetrate whichever side of the duality we happen to be engaged in the moment, whether it's difficult or it's blissful, and we're all caught up in the joy of it until we realize that this too shall pass, and now we're panicked because it will pass. Yes. So this is radical trust. And you might say that when you come to the point where you are starting to experience something, a circumstance, a person, a situation in your life where you feel like, oh, I just don't know if I can trust anymore, I don't know if I can do this. Remember that radical trust is the letting go of that doubt and that fear. Placing your baggage on the floor of the train of beingness. Taking that heavy weight of your individuality off of your head, out of your heart, and putting it firmly in what you already know, that you are that which is aware. Only that.
feel like I have a level of insanity that is really insanity, and it keeps me from using the words, even the words of the inquiry, to even be able to see out. And I worry that it really is like some breakdown of the brain that like won't allow me a view of the possibility that you're talking about. And I seem to continue to go believe that.
Yes.
And the words that mean so much to me at a certain point mean absolutely nothing. They hold no weight. I can say them and there's no strength in them, no connection. And so it's like this radical truth, or radical trust almost seems impossible in those moments. At other moments I've had it like you're talking about, when it's good and I'm feeling good and connected and whatever. But at other times, and I don't know if other people are like this.
So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the possibility through understanding that you're in the midst of an opportunity when things are difficult. What tends to go first when you're in the middle of something that's really difficult? Isn't it the understanding that this is an opportunity?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It goes right away. Right? Whenever we're experiencing something like this, where we just feel absolutely lost by what our mind is doing, we need to go towards simplicity. Because if we try to go towards something, some wordy connection with something we used to think about or we used to know, we won't be able to. Why? Because the mind is very clouded at that time. So we have to go to something very simple. And that something is something as simple as wait. Wait for what? Wait for it to pass. Have you noticed that you're not in that state all the time?
Lately, it's like I am, but I mean, realistically.
I mean, over the course of your life,
Sure.
you notice that you're not in that state all the time. You are there sometimes. We're not denying that, right? So we're not going into a state of denial. But I'm sure that by now you've learned over time that if you wait, things will change. No? So this is something you have that's in this is a foundation of your experience. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just like right now, as you're explaining this to us, there's a feeling that you have, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a reality to what you're explaining, what you're expressing. That this is real for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if I say to you, who are you talking about?
Me?
Me. So now are you looking at me?
My perception of me?
Right, but see, in order for you to say that, you had to stop the story for just a moment. And I said, who are you talking about? You had to stop it, right? In other words, you had to put it down. You had to let the story go for a minute so that you could turn in some way and look toward the perception of me, right? Now you can say, this me is really only this story. But that's not true, because you were telling the story, you were explaining to us what you were experiencing. This is valid. But as soon as I say who is having that experience, you have to look. Is this not true? You have to look and say, well, I'm having this experience. I'm not expressing this about her. I'm not expressing this about him. This is me I'm talking about. So you've already turned away from the story toward the perception that there is a me. It's true?
It feels like the story is so attached that when I turn to look at me, that is me. If that makes any sense.
So then the only thing you can do is challenge that belief. Have you ever done that?
Usually in that state, I just believe it. So.
Okay, so if you just believe it in that state, what brings it to an end?
Time. Or sometimes I might take some healthy action, hopefully.
Okay. So, the inquiry is just another healthy action. So, understand that what actually happens is that you, at some point, you get tired of listening to that story. You get tired of living in the emotion of that me-ness. And you make a decision. I'm going to turn away from it. So I do something healthy for myself. I recognize that this needs to be brought to an end, so I take some action to do that. This is also the inquiry. So you're already doing naturally what the inquiry is calling for. Now the inquiry is absolutely calling for it on a deeper level in some way. So it's not saying, go for a run, you know. It's not saying meditate, right? Distract yourself in some way that's spiritually oriented. And that's fine, of course. When you're in a situation where the mind feels completely caught up in whatever story it's telling, and it feels very, very crazy around that situation, you certainly can try to take up some of the spiritual tools that you and I have talked about, right? The name of God, whatever. But what you naturally do, you've already had this experience, so you don't need to convince yourself of anything. I don't need to convince you of anything. You naturally just turn away from that story as being counterproductive. Now, it may be true that for one person, just the recognition that something is rising and it is not me, it's just an emotion, or it's just a thought, right? Or it's just a state of mind, is enough to just wipe it out. Whereas for you, you have to go way deep into whatever the story is, whatever the state of mind is. You have to become thoroughly tired of it before you are willing to take action to move yourself out of it. So for you, what you're doing is learning to cultivate that attitude more quickly, not to give the snarling dog of your own mind so much leash to run on. Right? To actually bring that outward flow back to, what can I do more quickly? Whether that something is to go for a run, if you're a person who's really into exercise and running and all of that, and the endorphins of running 5 miles, or you're just a person who just wants this to end, and so you just are willing to just stop thinking about it in some way, find some tool. For you, because we've talked about this a number of times, I'm going to say it's time for you to start to take a longer view. And the reason I say that is because if you take a longer view, in other words, take the view I'm working on this, right? Rather than the view that I'll never get out of this, it might be helpful for you. It might be. The most direct help is to realize who is it that's experiencing this, and to really challenge the belief that what I'm experiencing is real. And you challenge this this is the radical trust part, you challenge this in the face of the belief that what you're experiencing is real. This is who I am. I'm this crazy mind. So just like you pick up helpful, healthy behaviors after you're already sunk deep in it, now pick this up more quickly. Right? Because if you pick it up right now, which is the reason why you come to satsang, by the way, almost every time you come, you're caught up in this again, and we spend a few minutes talking about it, and by the end of that time, I can watch your whole body start to relax. I can watch your mind start to relax. This is fine. This is what satsang is for in some way, is you're relying on being here, hearing these words again, right? That's a healthy behavior for you in order to counter what's going on. So now do it now. You see, you already have the experience of feeling what it's like to go deep into this story of me and come to satsang, and by listening and by interacting and by being together with all of us, you're able to let go. Yes? Even if it's just for a moment, even if it's just for that moment. And even if your mind is telling you, mostly, not really, sitting here interacting with you, it's easy to watch your body relax. And see, sometimes the mind does not relax, even when body relaxes. But eventually, if we keep breathing, and we keep being here now, mind begins to let go. So this is where you're at. This is what's here now. Just keep going. Eventually what's going to happen is this voice, these instructions, which we renew every couple of weeks, they are going to come up in mind almost simultaneously with this story of me. Right now, there still is a momentum. You can feel it, right? There's a momentum of the story that says, I don't know if I'm strong enough. What if this crazy mind is true? There's a momentum to that, because you come back every few weeks with that story having grabbed you again, right? Sometimes, however, in between the times you come, does this voice ever come up in your head and say, wait a minute, I can put this down?
No.
Does it ever come up? You've been coming now for several months, right? Okay, so what we're going to be doing now as we go through this time and time again is strengthening. When you're not able to hear your own inner knowing, which says, I'm not this craziness, right? When you're not able to hear that, then it's time, certainly, to come back to satsang and hear it again from the outside. But eventually you have to hear it on the inside. And that will happen. What's here now?
Me.
Are you here?
Partially.
What's the part that's not here now? Is there two of you? One that's here now and one that isn't?
It's like tug of war. Just, you know, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I can take anything anybody says to me and use it against me.
Can you take anything anybody says to you and strengthen yourself? Right now? If I use these words, if I say strengthen yourself right now, what happens?
Opposition.
What is real about opposition?
What's real about opposition?
Yes.
It's supposed to keep you safe, I suppose. Guarded.
So all of these thoughts, are they keeping you safe?
That's ironic.
Ah. And so if I just say to you, are you here now? Drop all of those thoughts, are you here now? Don't think about it, are you here now? Do you feel unsafe or do you feel safe? If you're here now, don't look in your mind, you're looking, your eyes are like this. It's interesting to watch because what actually happens is your eyes go to the right and you're up here, they go to the center, they go to the left, they come back to the right. There's a searching going on that's actually in the mind to validate the fact that you don't need these thoughts. In other words, you are looking for a way to validate these thoughts when what you're being instructed to do is don't give any license to these thoughts at all. And just be here. And then answer the question, do you feel safe when you do that? So if you don't let thought intervene, if you don't search through your library of your own personal history, and you're just here, are you okay? Is it okay with you to just be okay? Or do you need that story of me, that sense of being out of control, in order to feel as though you are alive? Can you feel your aliveness without your thoughts? Yeah, that was very quick. So this is your experience, that you can feel your aliveness without this story of me. Are you right now? Do you know you're here? Do you feel you're alive? Is it dependent upon you having this split in your mind? Or is it just here?
There's just like a nagging sensation. It doesn't even have to come with thought. Like an anxiety or impending doom.
So take
I
a
can
breath.
validate it with
No,
thought.
so take a breath. You take a breath. You just stopped breathing when you said that. So I'm very clear that that's what's happening for you. So keep being here. Just keep breathing and being here. And let that sense of impending doom, that sense of anxiety, rise if it wants to. And just keep breathing. Just keep being here. So if that sense of doom or that sense of anxiety rises in you and it's present now, does it prevent you from being here or feeling your aliveness? Are you okay with I don't know? Okay. Most anxiety, most fear comes out of the belief that if I don't know, I can't survive. So now, just be here in this not knowing. And that means not knowing if there's nothing in the mind, and it means not knowing if this sense of craziness or difficulty or terror rises in the mind. Be clear that just because a thought comes doesn't mean you know something. And that the remedy to thinking you know something is to realize you don't know anything. And be comfortable with that. As comfortable as you can be in this moment. Don't have an expectation about what it means to be comfortable with it. Right? And breathe. You see, the mind will always take us in the direction of what it wants us to know if we try to stay in not knowing. It doesn't like that feeling. So it will take us in the direction of what's familiar to it, even if that's not correct. Even if that's a falsehood that the mind is telling us. The mind will take us in the direction of what is familiar, rather than staying in not knowing. But you just have the experience of some relief if you just say, I don't know. And you just let yourself sink into that not knowing. The recognition of your own truth, of your own knowing of who you are, begins with these very short flashes of recognition that I don't know and it's okay. As I said, even if it only lasts a moment, even if it only lasted as long as it took me to say it, and then you went right back into wanting to know and going in a familiar direction, even though it's painful, even though it's borne no fruit in the past, I will still go back. To what I know habitually. When the only place I can really find any relief at all is in this not knowing. So just for the next few minutes, just sit there and be as comfortable as you can be with not knowing. The more time we spend in not knowing, the more likely it is that our conditioning is going to rise to the surface. So the question becomes, do I believe my conditioning over and over and over and over, thereby reinforcing it? Or do I take a position, make some effort, small or large, to remain with not knowing? If I remain with not knowing, all of my fear is going to come up. If there's fear left, the fear of not knowing will come up, whatever it is for you. And of course it changes. Sometimes it's the fear that I won't survive. Sometimes it's the fear that I won't wake up before I die. Sometimes it's the fear that she will leave me. Sometimes it's the fear he will leave me. But this is part and parcel of understanding that in both sides of any duality, there is only one. Duality appears as two. Knowing and not knowing appear as two. But there is only one. Do you experience yourself as two? If you know you are here, is there two of you here? Or is there only one? There may be two types of thought, right? There may be knowing and not knowing. There may be crazy and sane, over and against one another, comparing one another. But the one who knows, there is not two. There is one who knows and one who does not know. There is one who is clear and one who is not clear. There is one who is crazy and there is one who is sane. In all those circumstances, you are the one who is aware of whatever the circumstances are. If you really take this to heart, you begin to understand that you needn't pay any attention to whether you know or don't know, whether you are clear or unclear. Why? Because clear is going to pass, unclear is going to pass. Knowing is going to pass. Not knowing is going to pass. But the awareness which is here, free from all the duality of it all, of the mental experience of living, remains constant. It is simply constant. It's so simple we don't see it. And this is why the inquiry and all of the other spiritual practices that get brought up here from time to time is about turning back toward this sense of oneness and not believing either side of the duality, even though it's present very strongly, right? Can be present very strongly. Your task is to simply say, I'm not that though. What am I? If I'm not that, if the teaching says, if Rishi says, you're not that. I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're feeling, I know the thoughts you're expressing, but you are not that. Then what are you? You see, what I'm always talking about, sometimes eloquently, sometimes not so much, is that there is something beyond what we're talking about. And most of the time, when we talk, for many of you, there's this need to stay and to keep attention in what we are talking about. But what I'm always encouraging you to do is see what we're not talking about. What is here that makes it possible for us to have this conversation? What was here first? You see? In this way, the conversation and the subjects of the conversation or the objects of the conversations are not important. They aren't significant. As much as your ego would like me to believe the story of me that you're telling me, it's a falsehood. It is not true. So, I keep saying to you, what makes this story possible? What makes this story possible? Even a very difficult story like you're having, or you were having when you came in, even a very difficult story like that, where is that story when you fall into deep sleep? It's just gone. So in a way, it can be said, this is why Bhagavan said, Ramana said, so just stay asleep. Because in a way, if you can recognize that you were there in deep sleep, and you are there when this difficult story is here, you can realize you are neither deep sleep nor this story. What are you? What are you? Be insistent about asking this question. This is so that you can lose this infatuation with a kind of belief that says, there are two of me. One who has this experience and the one who has its opposite. No, there's one of you. It may have this experience and its opposite, but the one that has the experience is only one. It's not two, it's not multiple. And this is why it becomes critical to understand that you are not your thoughts. And this very simple tool that they use in Vedanta, called neti neti, not this, not this. So that whatever appears, if there's a sense in you, I am having this thought. You can do one of two things. You can say, who is having this thought, and let the whole thing dissolve. Or you can say, but I am not this thought. I'm not this thought. You can just brush it aside. And I know that it sounds maybe like I'm saying to you in a very difficult circumstance, just to say, just this is not. But I'm not minimizing what you're experiencing. I'm asking you only to look more deeply and to see what has to be here, which is that sense of unity, of oneness, the sense of that which is aware, which has to be here in order for you to have this very difficult and upsetting conversation that you're holding with yourself. Something has to be here first, which is not your mind. And you can notice that almost as soon as I begin to go back and forth with you and we begin to dance in this entanglement that you're in, that as soon as I can get you distracted from the entanglement, you feel better. You feel some relief, right? This is what happens. So this is further proof that what you're looking at is not the basis of reality. It's actually an object in reality. Reality itself is the consciousness or the awareness which knows I am. Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvargamiva Bandhanam Mrityor Mukshiyamamritawa Swaha Uva Om Sat Jung Hang Om. Namaste.